Hi everyone, welcome to Thursday Night Saws. Tim Ard here. Hope you're having a good one. We just had some terrible tornado and windstorms and things like that coming across the area, and the internet's kind of been shut off tonight. So I wanted to put together a little bit on the hard drive and kind of talk about some things I wanted to discuss. And then next time our chat will be able to kind of go through some of them also. But over the past few weeks, I've had some questions about, can you explain a little bit about what they call the shark's gill technique, and also triple hinge. And then I've had some questions over the past few weeks. People bring up, have you ever tried the ziz wheel technique? So people get on YouTube and they watch a lot of different presentations. Some of them are the I guess you'd say how-to shows. Some of them are logger channels, and then some of them are just firewood cutters. So I put together some things looking over YouTube and looking at some basics, some from older techniques and history and experience and all kinds of different things. So I want to kind of talk through that a little bit, and we'll take a look at some different hinges, and then we'll take a look at some of these advanced techniques. And so I want to kind of do that with you. So we'll start up a little video here, and we'll kind of talk through it as we go. Let's take a look at some of these different techniques here. Hopefully you guys can stay on. Yeah, good enough. But this is a technique that's been used in a lot of, especially in high dollar saw areas, as far as log trees. This is walnut cutting in an area, and this gentleman has many years of experience. He's been in the woods, and he uses what he calls the boar cut technique. This is what some people call a spur cutting technique. And a large walnut tree came down, and basically no pulled fiber, but no control. In other words, you just cut and then
the video here, like from what I see through
end
the
up
camera,
with
what I see in like real
a
life,
tree coming off the stump, and
really
it
doing
can come back a little bit, but basically roll out to the ground. And this was another one off of that operation.
We're going to put a notch and a hinge in this.
Talking about he didn't like to use the hinge.
But
with
what we'll
walnut
do is
trees.
we won't leave a full length hinge. We'll actually kind of bore back into the center and just try to leave two little tabs that bring it on over once we clip it. We'll wait for Dad to get this one.
So he uses a bore cut technique here, but he's leaving hinges. But this one kind of rolled off of the tree in front there, so you can kind of see it pulled it a little bit.
This exactly right here is why I don't like hinge in walnut, because walnut's really brittle. And just like that, it was a hard leaning tree. I tried to come back in and bore out the center here.
But on that one, the hinge was a little bit thick on the left side. The one he was talking about where the crack was actually the right side of the stump. And yeah, just a small triangle there. It did pretty well. But when it hit the other tree, it rolled off, which It would have been good to have it set up that way with a smaller hinge on that right side, so when it did hit the other tree, it would roll off of it. But what it did as it hit the other tree was it cracked, but it's still out of the cylinder of wood. Didn't really damage or really hurt much of the quality of that particular tree. But he made a statement that that's the reason why he doesn't like to use the hinge. But then he cut another one, and you can tell his skill level is there, and he basically did a very
You can
good
see,
job on this
and
second
still I left a
tree.
little too much fiber, and we didn't hurt the tree bad, but for my
A lot more precise on this one. He likes to start with that corner of the bar, which goes back past the tip, so it went in there.
this one here.
You can see on this one, he had two really nice hinges, and face notch was good. No Dutchman, no bypass at all. Nice flush cut stump, and so this one did very, very nicely. And that's the way the first one would have done, I think, if it hadn't have been for rolling off of the other tree, which caused it to split before it got to a position where, the hinge breaks from the back to the front. And so that's what we have to remember, is that any resistance in that area is going to cause the fiber to pull. He made the statement here, if he didn't already, in a minute, talking about he used the hinge technique on maples and on ash trees, but he doesn't like to use it on the walnuts. And these are, he's in the high dollar wood business, so basically he doesn't want any pulls or splits. But if he cuts the hinges like this one each time, he's not going to have any splits or pulls, I don't think, for sure.
Turned out a little better. You can see I tried to trim more of my tabs there, but I still, it's not a style that I'm very used to using anyway. I get along with it really well on my maple and ash, but my walnut, I just do not like cutting my walnut like that, but sometimes I really feel it's the best way to do it.
Man, I love that. Absolutely fantastic. Obvious mistakes here, and I'll talk more about that as we buck the tree up.
So this gentleman has a kind of a farm show, and got some nice equipment. He's wearing PPE, and he's got a really good planning process. We'll play through some of this. He cut the first one. He knows that he left his hinge too thick, and so we'll see what happens on this particular tree. But then after the tree comes down is really what concerns me on this particular one.
Okay, the reason that happened is as I cut back to the trigger, I had left too much hinge.
So the tree barber chaired, and that's very, very typical when you start to think about a hinge being too thick. And it's nice having the equipment there to be able to get that off of the stump. Would have been a little bit kind of tricky for some to be able to take the rest of that down and lower it. But he takes his skid steer and he gets the log down on the ground. And if you look at the actual elevation there, once it gets to the ground, let me see if I can get that back over there. Then you can see here that he pushes it on over. Now he's got it down to the ground. He could easily go up and take his first log length there. But you can see the area is elevated big time. So his plan is,
I'm gonna put a notch in the limb and then see if we can snap it off with the skid loader. There's so much weight up in the air, but it's gonna be harder to get down than it looks, I think.
now this is what I really have a problem with, because people don't realize, first of all, he lost some of his PPE because I imagine it's getting a little warm out, but he took a very big chance there. If you look on the right side there's a tree that's bent over where the main trunk is of the walnut is up against it. And if he would have made it all the way through that, it could have flipped all the way over. And he would have been in a terrible situation right there. So it's important to think about a plan. But he's got his cable on there. He cuts a little notch onto it. He goes over and pulls it back out with the skid steer, which is a little bit of thinking there. But he could have lowered this all down to the ground with a bucking cut on the log and working himself up towards the top. But he didn't understand that technique.
Down. So I'm going to try to give a quick explanation for the people who know even less than I do.
His saw here is, I think, cutting a little bit crooked, but and also metal wedges, I think, is probably the reason why it was starting to get dull. But
stretches all that fiber and does what you just saw. Now the method I use, picture of it I saw, but as I get up there, it's a little worse than what I thought it was. But I think I'm going to.
He's got a large dead hardwood. Don't know exactly what it is. Looks like it might be an ash, but it's been there for a while, air dried. And he puts together a pretty decent plan on it, but didn't recognize the drier fiber doesn't bend as well as the green fiber does. So he has a little bit of a time with it. But he also makes a statement that a lot of the limbs could come out if the tree is hollow. I don't know whether that causes them to come out or not, but he did have a little issue with the limb at the end. I'll just let this play through a little bit.
This way, up the hill, and probably clear a lot of this little stuff in front of it. Let's go get a closer look. Oh, I can just almost reach around it. Pretty good size, but I've cut a lot of trees bigger than this one to get this tree down without getting hurt. This isn't a field tree like what a lot of my... If we can get a shot of what the top of the tree looks like. Tree like what a lot of my cut are field trees, and they go more out than up. I'm used to at the top, but it is a chance of one of those, if this is hollow, having a branch come down on my head. Before anything else, I'm just gonna poke a hole in this tree and find out if it's hollow or not, because that saw went through really easy, but the chips are not that dark brown from a rot.
So he bored into that kind of horizontal, which he did good because he stayed close to the back of the tree, so it didn't really affect his hinge. But he could have also bored through vertical if he was worried about the tree structure there.
So
Now coming up here, you can see he puts a pretty thick tapered wooden wedge in there and starts driving it, and he hits it very, very hard. You know, if you don't have the hinge that's bendable, you're going to be shaking the top like crazy on that tree. So you always want to make sure before you drive a wedge a lot, especially that he said the tree was pretty much straight, so it wouldn't have taken much to tip it over. And so he reduced the hinge a little bit, and it came on down.
They say that you always judge a feller by his stump, and I wouldn't give myself a very high grade on this. But the thing with this tree is I really believe it was perfectly balanced, because I cut it down to a hinge that was 2 inches. And normally at 2 inches, my trees I'm trying to keep them from going. But this thing at 2 inches, I was burying this wedge. And look how fat that wedge is. I was burying that wedge and I couldn't get it to go over. When it finally went, the hinge right here was down under an inch, and the other side had no hinge at all. So definitely not something I would advise, to cut all the way through your hinge. But I was trying to go slow, and I was driving wedges more than I was running the saw. So maybe I should have had another couple sets of wedges over here and over here and here, and just kept working them. Or the alternative is to have something pull, but there's not a lot of opportunity to get uphill from this and pull. So anyway, it's always successful when it comes down and no one got hurt. But there was actually, I would guess I would call it, I had an accident during this falling, because when this fell, it hit another tree, and a branch off another tree fell and hit me in the head. And I can't even figure out what it was, because there's no branches laying next to here that looks like the right size.
So now I've got a little bit here. I'm not sure which country this is from, but it's an explanation of the ziz wheel felling. And I have not yet figured out exactly a benefit of this technique. Everyone that I've seen on YouTube, unless they're using it with a rope or something to pull the tree away from a structure or something like that, there's really no advantage whatsoever to using this technique that I can see. He could have, when you see this, he could have aimed the tree away from the other tree. It had side lean heavy, but forward lean. And this might be a perfect tree for a triple hinge technique, and just aim away. But you can see at the end it didn't go to where he had it face notched. So how do you calculate that situation if it doesn't go where you wanted it to go?
The tree, my next tree, we've got quite a heavy lean, and I don't want it to get hung up in the other trees. I've also got quite a strong crosswind which is blowing it even further. I've done a normal felling cut, and then I have elongated the side that I want it to hold on. This allows the hinge fibres to pull out, but not actually sever. So I want the felling cut to go, because once you've got everything cut away here, it's quite hard to judge. So by scoring that, I've got a line, so I can now judge to get my felling cut.
I offset with the lean with this face notch, and then this big ziz wheel, I guess he calls it, you know, coming down the front. And concept here is that as the tree starts to move, that hinge material becomes long and flexible so that it allows the tree to twist. And he says he's putting a Dutchman in on this right side, but it doesn't appear to have any damage or any Dutchman to the hinge on the face notch, and the face notch is smooth to the front of the hinge. So I haven't figured this out quite yet. And watch now, the tree twists over, but stays to the right of the face notch.
So as we look on this side, we can see that the hinge has not broken and it's ripped down the tree to hold it for longer, and this offsets the lean of the tree.
I just I don't see any advantage in safety or in mechanical advantage to this cut. And when that hinge pulls away, you know, a half a foot or a foot down from the actual apex of the notch, it can move a long way or it can pull out very easily. So it would have to have some really good fiber to work, and it's still you don't know how far it's going to move around. So it's not anything that a straight hinge and a wedge. He had to use the wedge anyway to drive it over. He could have just aimed it away from it, and it could be a positive application for the triple hinge. So I want to, think about what we saw there was, really no hinge at all, just using the spur roots, and then thinking about a straight hinge broken in the middle, and then looking how the fiber could work on the Ziz wheel. The hinge fiber is very strong if it's set up properly. And so that's what we need to really concentrate on. And I've got some here on straight from a cotton top, and you can kind of see that he does an excellent job with the hinges and the planning. And then I've got a couple things there on the shark's gill and also on the triple hinge. So I'll play this for you.
Where I can see how thick my hinge is right there. See, my hinge is made. A lot of people ask me all the time, why do you bore so much? You notice in the video, that hinge did not tear till that tree was right at the ground. And that's what you want. It keeps that tree attached to the stump. That's the seat belt to the ground for that tree right there. You cut through your hinge.
Cotton Top does an excellent job explaining. He's an excellent instructor, and he does a really good job explaining that hinge, especially on his whole video that you see if you watch the whole thing. This particular stump was Flogger Wade, and very experienced cutters, and they kind of put on a little bit of a show, but they know what they're doing. And so as you start to look at this one had a double or triple hinge on it, and this tree was leaning out over this creek pretty heavy, and he was able to bring it back around. And how he did that was having that triple hinge or double hinge on that uphill side, and it went pretty much exactly where he wanted it to go. It's a little bit rough on it, but it did good. Now this is the triple hinge kind of set up, but they call it the shark's gill, and this one arborists are using, and this one you can see the three areas. It goes all the way through. Now this one is set up, and if you look at it, there's in this area here, you've got a plunge cut through that goes below the face notch corner, which would be basically a vertical Dutchman. And so that one, as it goes over, closes and pulls, and then the second cut here is going to pull, and then the third one being up higher. And they're doing this for, I think, having a little bit more strength out of the hinge on like these white pines and spruce and fir. But it kind of really defeats the purpose when you get too much there close together. It more or less, as you can see here, it goes over and pulls and snaps, and it really all kind of does it at the same time. So kind of play through this, you can kind of see as this one goes down, and it pulls a lot of fiber, and it's strong side to side, but if you don't get enough movement there, it could split very easily. This is actually how Soren Eriksson used to set up the double or triple hinge, and this we played with over the years in a lot of different ways. I'll show you one here in a minute that basically had the vertical bores 3 times in the stump, but it didn't have that vertical Dutchman. And that's an important thing. You've got to have that back corner of the hinge working correctly to be able to have them break in succession. And so this one has a horizontal bore cut setting up the hinge, and then more or less you can see right back behind it there's 2 other vertical bores, and so this one is actually set up correctly. So he did his horizontal and then the 2 verticals, and that gave a lot of strength on the uphill side. And that one actually broke from the back to the front, and pulled some out of the stump, but some out of the trunk also. And so that's kind of a little bit of a tricky situation, but it's something to where what it's designed to do is to hold the tree, on that uphill side a little bit better. One thing I wanted to touch on here with the triple hinge, and just looking at this drawing, I've got the stump with the face notch here, and this was like the one I said that really was correct, and that is with a horizontal bore cut all the way through, and you could start on the bad side of it as a larger tree, set up your 10% hinge, come to your good side, bore in, match that up, leaving your 10% hinge here. Then you go back, and about, we used to do about 10% again, a couple of inch or 2 according to the size tree, and that's then a vertical bore. and those can be fairly even to the face notch level. We tried to put it into the stump whenever possible. And so what would happen is as the tree starts to go, this one closes, then this one closes, and then your actual hinge takes over. And so it helps to support that side. Now, what Soren always used to set up, let's say this is your tree, it's leaning down this way, the arrow's going this way. So this is your good side of the tree, this is the bad side. So you would take here and basically bore in and set up your hinge on your bad side and cut back out. If it was a back leaner slight, you would put a hinge, a wedge in place there, and then you would go to your good side of the tree and you would set up the bore cut through to establish your hinge, and then come back and do the verticals to be able to produce your second and third hinge. And so those would just go in until you got to what you didn't cut from the bad side. So this hinge over here will take over as it starts to go. So you've got 10% there to be able to support the weight on that side so it doesn't collapse over. And then if you needed to, and Soren actually did this usually in a half controlled or full controlled situation, if you put the wedge in there, then you have a full control. You could actually be able to remove some of this hinge, get the tree to sit over, and then rotate forward. But when OSHA changed some of the regulation there, we basically took away a lot of that thought process and just tried to keep the entire hinge. Or we would take and more or less, we would take that middle of the hinge out and then leave two small hinges here, as you saw in one of the other videos. And so that gave you the ability to have no heart pull, and then have the uphill hinges to be able to support the side weight more. But you still have to remember that face notch has to be aimed compensating for any side lean that you have. And I think maybe with the ziz wheel technique, that's what they're trying to do is to be able to get that tree to twist away from any other object or twist away from its lean. But how far it's going to twist in that case, you don't know. And you don't know whether that hinge is going to hold and be flexible. At least you can set this up and you don't have as much potential side movement that can cause the hinge to get a little bit weak there and set over. You know, that's another thing too, a lot of people don't think about. If you've got a stump shot, or you've got that 10 inches of the ziz wheel to come around there, that tree can set over, collapsing that if you've got any weight. And so if you've got it 3/8 inch kerf here up to the back end, if it collapses a hinge, it can't really sit over but about 3/8 of an inch. And if you wanted it to sit over and come away from the top, you can actually be able to calculate that. And so we've done that many, many times. So anyway, just a little update on that part. Back to the video. A little bit better. So the hinge all the way across, you know, can control side weight also. So now that shark's gill again. And this is the one that is actually done pretty well. This one goes all the way across though. And how Soren and I used to set this up is that this would be on the uphill side, your good side of the tree. The bottom side would be taken out with a bore cut in to set the hinge up, and then go in about half the diameter of the tree and cut back out to the back. You could place a wedge, and then you come around and work around to this on your good side. And these three hinges, they would break from the back to the front as they closed. So it gave a little bit of extra strength to your hinge until it got down to that final or your actual 10% hinge on there. But this one he had run all the way across, and that's really not much of an advantage, and especially with the vertical Dutchman, there's very good chance that you're going to split the tree. But this one is probably the correct one to look at there. So that's some interesting information, and hopefully you see some things there. But the one thing that all of these don't really put in their presentation is what actually is the information on the tree. The hazards, the side lean, the forward or back lean, the escape they plan, what good side they're going to work from, what they plan to leave in the hinge as far as thickness goes, especially on the front one, on either one, roughly 10% or a little less, and then how you're going to back cut it. Going all the way across, that still causes a lot of pull. Chances of barber chair are still there, especially with that vertical Dutchman. And so you want to try to think about, as that one large oak was across the creek, is that you want to make sure that you're supporting the uphill side there. And that's the concept of the triple hinge, is to support that uphill side, but still you end up with a straight hinge across, or two hinges across on each side. And so that gives you the ability to maintain the steering. It gives you the ability to escape and be able to overcome a lot of side lean there. But you also have to remember that if you have crown that's overlapping something or hanging against something, you've got to aim it away from that object, or it's going to split or spin or whatever. And hinges can be set up. We've done that over the years quite a lot, is if you knew that you had a limb that was going to pass, then basically you might have a 1 inch by 2 inch on that side of the tree, and then have a 4 by 2 inch on the good side, the uphill side. And so there's a lot that you can do with hinges. But the big thing goes back to the plan. You choose that tool because of your plan. And a lot of people are just watching video and then not really thinking through the process. They're trying to copy the technique. And the technique is chosen by the information that you gain in putting together your plan. So I hope y'all think through this a little bit. We're going to discuss some more about it in probably next week's Thursday Night Live. So I want you to think about it a little bit, come up with your answers and questions, and we'll talk about it. But y'all have a great one. Wish the internet was working tonight. We'd like to have the chat in on this, but maybe we'll do it next week. But I'll get this posted, and you can kind of look over it a little bit. But this is Tim Ard wishing y'all good sawing.